You're crouched at the base of a fig tree, and the air smells like rot and sugar. Fruit litters the ground around you, split open, weeks past ripe. You pick one up anyway. You eat it anyway. Your head goes warm, your worries go quiet. You didn't plan this. You didn't brew anything. The forest did it for you. Was this an accident? A one-time fluke of a hungry primate eating spoiled fruit? It wasn't. It was routine. For millions of years before humans existed, our primate ancestors were almost certainly consuming low levels of ethanol every single day, simply by eating fermenting fruit off the forest floor. 10 million years. That's roughly how far back biologists trace the genetic mutation that let our ancestors' bodies process alcohol efficiently. 10 million years of low-grade exposure baked into your DNA before your species even existed. And today, the average American adult drinks the equivalent of about 2.3 gallons of pure alcohol a year, according to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Same molecule, same ancient enzyme doing the work in your liver right now. Completely different relationship to it. So here's the question worth asking. When did drinking stop being something that happened to us and become something we chose to do? The evidence starts, strangely enough, not with humans at all, but with fruit flies, elephants, and tree shrews. Biologist Robert Dudley of UC Berkeley built what's known as the Drunken monkey hypothesis on exactly this pattern. Pen-tailed tree shrews in Malaysia feed nightly on fermented palm nectar that's naturally about 3.8% alcohol, roughly beer strength, and show no signs of impairment. African elephants seek out fermented marula fruit. Even fruit flies lay their eggs preferentially in alcohol-rich fermenting fruit because the ethanol kills off competing microbes and parasites. 3 completely unrelated species, 3 continents, 1 shared strategy. Let the yeast do the work and reap the calories. Now, some of you are thinking, that's animal behavior, not human history. Fair question, so look at the biology instead. Around 10 million years ago, a single mutation in a gene called ADH4 made one of our ancestors' digestive enzymes 40 times more efficient at breaking down ethanol. That's not folklore. That's a documented finding from geneticist Matthew Kerrigan's 2014 study tracing the mutation through the primate fossil record. Evolution doesn't rewire an enzyme 40-fold for something that happens by accident once in a while. It rewires it because fermented fruit was, for millions of years, dinner. Layer C brings us to the artifacts. And this is where the story stops being about biology and starts being about choice. Raqefet Cave in the hills near Haifa, Israel, 2018. Archaeologists led by Lee Liu and Danny Nadel found stone mortars cut directly into the cave floor, dated to roughly 13,000 years ago, used by the Natufian people, hunter-gatherers who lived right at the edge of the agricultural revolution. Residue analysis showed traces of wheat and barley that had been deliberately soaked, allowed to germinate, and left to ferment, the exact process that starts a beer. This wasn't a farming society. These people didn't grow grain as a staple crop yet. They were brewing before they were baking. Not for bread, not for survival calories, for something they wanted enough to build stone basins for it. Jiahu, China. Patrick McGovern, the biomolecular archaeologist often called the Indiana Jones of ancient booze, analyzed pottery shards from this Neolithic site dated to around 7,000 BCE. Chemical residue showed a mixed fermented drink of rice, honey, and hawthorn fruit, one of the earliest confirmed alcoholic beverages on Earth. And it wasn't found in a rubbish pit. It was found in the graves. Göbekli Tepe, Iran, roughly 3,400 to 3,000 BCE. Jars sealed with a resin, lined with calcium oxalate, the telltale residue of barley beer, stored in what appears to have been a household or ceremonial context, not a granary. 3 sites, 3 continents, thousands of years apart. Israel, China, Iran. Each one shows the same pattern, independently arrived at, not stumbled into, engineered. So let's reconstruct what that world actually looked like, starting at Raqefet 13,000 years ago. You wake before dawn in a limestone cave carved into a hillside. And the first job of the day isn't hunting, it's tending a batch. Days earlier, someone in your group ground wheat into flour, mixed it with water, and let it sit in a stone basin carved into the cave floor. Wild yeast, invisible and uninvited, drifted in on the air and got to work. Now the mixture bubbles faintly. It smells sour and alive. You strain it through a woven mat and drink. drink. This isn't rare. Anthropologist Brian Hardin argued that beer like this wasn't invented for nutrition. It was invented for gathering, for ritual, for the feeling of many bodies relaxing together after a hunt or a burial. And burial is exactly where you find it next. When someone in your group dies, you don't just bury them, you brew for them. Residue on Natufian grinding stones shows fermented drink was part of funerary feasts, alcohol shared over a grave, a toast across the boundary between the living and the dead. Move forward 4,000 years to Jiahu, and the reconstruction sharpens. You're not just brewing in a cave now, you're brewing in a village with kilns and pottery jars, mixing rice with honey and wild hawthorn fruit, letting it ferment for weeks. Patrick McGovern's residue analysis shows this drink was sealed into jars and placed directly alongside the dead in their graves, meant to accompany them into whatever came next. You didn't drink alone. You drank at funerals, at what were likely seasonal gatherings, at the exact moments when a community most needed to feel like one organism instead of 40 separate grieving people. So here's what that early relationship with alcohol looked like. Fermentation happened naturally, in fruit, in grain left too long in water. Humans noticed the effect, then learned to trigger it on purpose. The drink showed up first at graves and gatherings, not at every meal, and the alcohol content itself stayed low, closer to a modern light beer than anything distilled, because nobody yet knew how to concentrate it further. Then, around 5,000 years ago, something changed. Not the desire for alcohol, the technology around it. As farming spread and grain surpluses grew, brewing stopped being an occasional communal act and became a daily industry. In Mesopotamia, beer became a wage. Workers building structures like the pyramids at Giza were partly paid in beer rations, roughly a gallon a day for laborers, according to records studied by Egyptologists, because it was safer to drink than the water and packed real calories. Once beer becomes payment, you need more beer. More beer means more grain diverted from food. More grain diverted from food means tighter margins on famine years. The very drink that once marked sacred occasional gatherings became infrastructure, something the economy quietly depended on. Then came distillation, centuries later, arriving in different forms across the Islamic world, China, and medieval Europe. And this is where the bones tell the second half of the story. Just as skeletal evidence once proved the health of hunter-gatherer bodies, skeletal and dental evidence from later, denser agricultural populations shows something else: increased tooth decay, evidence of nutritional stress, and in some post-medieval European remains studied by bioarchaeologists, signs consistent with chronic, heavy drinking, cirrhosis-linked bone changes among them. The same molecule, the same enzyme, 40 times more efficient, going back 10 million years, but no longer rare, no longer sacred, no longer tied to a shared grave or a communal fire, just constant and available and alone. From there, it's a straight, fast line. Distilled spirits spread across trade routes over the following centuries. Industrial brewing arrived with the 19th century, and within the space of about 200 years, alcohol went from a grain-limited village product to something you can buy at 2 a.m. from a machine without another human being present. You crack open a can alone on a Tuesday, scrolling a phone, and nobody around you even notices. They drank together over a body they'd just lowered into the ground because the loss was too heavy for one person to carry sober. You drink to numb a feeling you don't have time to sit with. They drank to sharpen a feeling they needed the whole group to share. You can get alcohol in under 10 minutes. No ritual, no waiting, no yeast doing its slow, invisible work. They waited days, sometimes weeks, watching a stone basin bubble because the waiting was part of what made it meaningful. You measure a drink in proof, sometimes 40% alcohol or more. They were drinking something closer to 3 or 4%, barely stronger than the fruit their ancestors ate off the forest floor. You drink to escape the people in the room. They brewed to make sure no one had to sit with grief or hunger or fear by themselves. We traded ritual for routine, community for convenience, a slow fermenting basin watched by many hands for a can opened by one.